Good morning, grade 5 students. This is your teacher in science for Miss Laura, greeting you a scientific day. For today, we are going to talk about the different internal organs of the body that includes gallbladder, pancreas, spleen, bones, and muscle. This is the session 2 of week 9 discussions. For us to have the goal, this is our learning target. I can describe the function of the gallbladder, pancreas, spleen, bones, and muscles. And in order for us to achieve our learning target, of course, we will have our work plan. And our work plan includes let's go back, discussion time, Q&A, and wrap up. So let's go back with our recent discussion, which is all about the function of liver, stomach, kidney, small intestine, and large intestine, and of course urinary bladder. These internal organs are really important, especially in terms of the food that we take in and how it helps cleanse our bloodstream. And somehow, these internal organs are also considered important in order for us not to have different diseases or problems that might happen into our body. So, these diseases, or without knowing these diseases, it would lead us to risk and harmful effect into our health. And so, aside from the different internal organs that we have just discussed last time, we also have another set of internal organs to be discussed today. These are the functions of gallbladder, pancreas, spleen, bones, and muscles. So let's start with the gallbladder. So the gallbladder is the reservoir of holding the bile on its way to the liver to the intestines. So it makes the bile that helps digest fat from the food that we eat. It stores also glycogen and the glycogen, so the glucose which is formed from carbohydrates and is the main source of the fuel of our body, which is eventually it can be help into our energy. So um, the gallbladder receives the bile from the liver and stores it until it is needed in the digestive system to break down fats and cholesterol. Aside from that, we also have the different layers of the gallbladder, namely the epithelium, which is a thin sheet of cell closest to the inner layer of the gallbladder. We also have the lamina propria, which is a thin layer of loose connective tissues. Also, we have the muscularis, a layer of smooth muscular tissue that helps the gallbladder to contract and squirt the bile into the bile ducts. In other words, this is the reason why the bile keeps on moving or keeps on moving to the stomach or intestine. We also have the perimuscular or around the muscle. It is a fibrous tissue, another layer of connective tissue. And lastly, we have the serosa. Serosa is an outer covering of the gallbladder that comes from the peritoneum, which is lining of the abdominal cavity. So this serosa is the outer lining of the gallbladder. In other words, it is the outer part or the skin of the gallbladder. Now let's proceed to the pancreas. Pancreas secretes digestive juices into small intestines. It also produces the hormones called insulin and glucagon. Insulin is the hormone produced in the pancreas which regulates the amount of glucose in the blood, and the lack of insulin causes a form of diabetes. This is the reason why people tend to take insulin if they have diabetes. So when we talk about glucagon, it is a hormone formed in the pancreas which promotes the breakdown of glycogen or glucose in the liver, which can eventually gives us an idea that it is very helpful in our energy. So this part of the pancreas, the head, is the widest part and lies in the curve of duodenum. So if you could remember, duodenum is a part of the um, intestine, and it is also connected, or yeah, it is connected with the pancreas. Aside from that is the spleen. The spleen filters and stores blood to protect the body from infection and blood loss. So spleen is just a small part of our of our body, but then it gives us, or it has a great role in protecting the body from infections and blood loss. So the spleen contains lymphocytes and macrophages that that engulf and destroy bacteria. So these are the things that would eventually destroy the bacteria or infection in the bloodstream. So dead tissues and foreign matter, and remove them from the blood passing through the spleen. So every time that the bloodstream passes through the stream or the spleen, the lymphocytes and macrophage would eventually make or move or do their work in order to protect our body and of course engulf and destroy the bacteria. So this spleen is the one that protects our body and help fight infection. We also have our bones. So bones has different or a lots or has a lot of functions. First is it is a framework of the entire body. So without the bone, it is really impossible for us to stand straight and move forward. Aside from that, bones also protects delicate structures like the brain, the spinal cord, the heart, and the lungs. If you would notice, all of these internal organs is being covered or protected by the bones. Next, it serves as the lever, which are activated by the muscles and attach, or muscles attach. So these also serves as our levers when we are moving. Our bones also serves as a storehouse for the calcium. So uh, we all know that the reason why we tend to drink um, milk is that to have calcium, and this calcium can be stored in the bones. And lastly, the bones also produce blood cells, or we call red blood cells, in the red bone marrow. It's not only the red blood cells, but blood cells which are being stored and being formed in the red bone marrow. It is found inside of our bones. So there are different types of bones that we have in our body. We call them short bones, like the cuneiforms, which is a cube shape with a thin layer of compact bone surrounding the spongy interior. We also have the long bones. One of the example is the femur. So it is a compact bone with lesser amount of arrow. We also have the fat bone. So an example of the fat bone is our sternum. So it is a thin curve with two parallel layers of compact bones sandwiching a layer of spongy bones. So these are spongy bones. We also have the irregular bones, or we have the vertebra. So irregular bones, and these are irregular bones and complicated shape with thin layer of compact bones surrounding a spongy interior. And lastly, we have the sesamoid bone. So one example of our sesamoid bone is what we can found beneath or inside of our knees, or our knees, the patella. So it is a small round bones embedded with tendons. So these are the different types of bones. So of course, if we are talking about bones, then we also have our muscles. The muscles work with bones. The engine of the bone is to propel itself, and eventually it makes up more than half of our weight. So muscle contracts is in the tightening, shortening, or lengthening of the muscles when you do some activity. And the main function is contraction. So contraction happens when you flex your biceps or when you do some workouts. So contractions happens when you, of course, when you move your muscles or use your muscles. So muscles movement could be voluntary or involuntary. So when you say voluntary, it usually happens in amount of time that you need to work on that. But when say involuntary, it always move all the time. So these are the different types of muscles. We have the cardiac muscle, we have the skeletal muscle, and the smooth muscle cells. Cardiac muscles are the muscles in our heart. Skeletal muscle cells are the muscles attached to the bone, and the smooth muscle cells are the muscles which are found in our internal organs. So we can say that skeletal muscles are skeletal and visceral. Of course, aside from that, smooth muscles, we have the GI tract, the bladder, the blood vessels, the uterus, and the large ducts. We can say that the heart is involuntary because it moves on its own. So, or in other words, it pumps on its own. But the skeletal muscle is different because without our movement, it will not work. Aside from that, the small muscle cells also is an involuntary muscle because it moves or it makes its own work or its own movement on its own. It's not us that controls it, but it has its movement on its own. So those are the different internal organs that we have to discuss for today. Now let's take a look at Charles Auster. He is 96 years old. But in reality, or most of the people or old age people whose age is 96 is now bedridden. Why? What do you think is the reason, or what might be the reason for their differences? You might think that they are taking good care of their body, at the same time they are healthy and fit. So, it is important for us to understand the meaning of health is wealth. So, without the health, if we are not healthy, even though we have a lot of money, we will not consider ourselves as wealthy. So, don't forget our scientific thought for today: health is wealth. So, if you have questions, you may ask it through the Genio chat. Miss Shara or me could eventually give you the answer for those questions. Or you may ask them during our synchronous classes. Okay? So I hope we were able to achieve our learning target to identify or describe the functions of gallbladder, pancreas, spleen, bones, and muscles. To end up, I hope you will be sharing your heart, thumbs up, and raise hand. Thank you for your time, grade 4 students. Have a scientific day and God bless.